Hi there, this is Solitary Rodents from Solitary Rodent Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is from 1990, and it's the latest release from Radiance. It's The Hotspot, directed by Dennis Hopper. 7 years sober, Dennis Hopper, starring Don Johnson, Virginia Madsen, Jennifer Connelly, and a host of character actors, including Jack Nance, and Charles Martin Smith, and an early wonderful performance as a scumbag by William Sadler, who, as we know, has made one or two performances as scumbags. And Barry Corbin is also in it and is wonderful. Obviously, I love him the best from Northern Exposure as Maurice, the ex-astronaut. And a couple of guys that you might not recognise the name, but you'll know the face: Leon Rippey and Jerry Hardin. So lots of character actors round out this cast. I didn't actually see this on video, or if I did, I completely forgot about it when it was out in 1990. Again, you get a nice booklet and reversible artwork. This is based on a book by Charles Williams, and it's essentially a neo-noir, but it's a really interesting film. Hopper shoots it in longer takes. It's much more of a slow burn, which is a wonderful comparison to the films of today. You know, it's a good 30 odd minutes before we really kind of have an idea of what's going on. Don Johnson just turns up in this town. He's a man of no past that we find out about, which is also wonderful. And he kind of drifts into picking up a car salesman job, and his colleague is the wonderful Charles Martin Smith. And the owner of this car lot is married to Virginia Madsen, who, according to Dennis Hopper's description of the characters, to Virginia Madsen is basically a peach on the verge of going rotten. And that's kind of where she got her character from. You have the classic femme fatale, obviously, but she's on the more extreme range of the fatale part. You also have Jennifer Connelly, who at the time was 20. We all remember from Labyrinth, but obviously she grew up, and she certainly grows up in this film. And she does the books for the car showroom, if you want to call it that. But she has her own problems with local scumbag William Sadler, who knows something about her past, and he eventually knows something about Don Johnson's future once it gets in the past. And lots of things have to be resolved. It is a neo-noir, so Don Johnson gets deeper and deeper into the hole as the trouble and the bodies mount up. It was a soundtrack with Jack Nitzsche, featuring John Lee Hooker and other people. But again, it's Hopper's use of the camera. It's one of those films that you can almost feel the heat through the screen. It's fitting that I'm doing this in the middle of a heat wave in Scotland, which doesn't happen that often. This is probably our summer, and we won't get anything again until next year. But even although you can see the sweat, you can almost feel the heat. Don Johnson's character does wear a vest and a shirt, which just seems incredible. It just took me right out of the film experience, and the believability, the fact that in these 100+ temperatures he's wearing a vest and a shirt, which is just outrageous. But what I like about it is it's an interesting film for me, at least, as far as, with the exception of Jennifer Connelly, none of the characters, and Charles Martin Smith, sorry, none of the characters are that likeable. And when I ranked my Radiance 1 to 12 or 12 to 1, I kind of pointed out that Miami Heat and Alec Baldwin's character is really unlikable, and for me it tips the balance of being too unlikable to be interesting. And yes, he's more of a low level scumbag, but Don Johnson's character in The Hotspot isn't particularly likeable. He doesn't say much. He can treat people badly. He does have his eye on nefarious activities. He does get involved with a married woman. He does get involved with Jennifer Connelly, who is 17 years his junior. So he's not particularly a nice guy either. But it is a thin line between, not Stupid and Clever, but it's a thin line between being too unlikable to be interesting and just being unlikable enough. And that's why I enjoy and would recommend The Hotspot, which is the name of the strip club, I believe, in the film, rather than Miami Blues, because I was just like turned off by Alec Baldwin's character too much. It's just that crossed the line for me. But as I say, Don Johnson's character in The Hotspot is hardly a nice person either. And there's some film noirs where, somebody coming back from the war, they're not a bad person, they just make a bad decision out of sometimes desperation, financial or otherwise. And they end up being in this whirlwind of this maelstrom that they just can't get out of. Whereas most of Don Johnson's problems in The Hotspot are all down to his own actions. He's not like an innocent, caught up in mistaken identity or anything like that. All the problems that he has in The Hotspot are of his own making, which is kind of interesting as far as the noir concept, because like I say, sometimes you can be an accidental victim of noir. So it's a wonderful film. I do think it is one of the few kind of quote unquote erotic thrillers, if you want to call it that is actually quite naughty. Even Don Johnson gets his bottom out a couple of times. Jennifer Connelly is, everybody gets naked at one point. It's okay, not Jack Nance. And again, just because of the slow pacing, the slow burn, it's 130 minutes, but it doesn't feel like a slow film, even though it's shot, longer takes. Hopper wanted the camera to be less intrusive. It's just a really well made film of 90s, because Dennis Hopper was a pretty good director himself, and certainly in the extras, certainly Virginia Madsen and William Sadler both talk about how great it was to work with Hopper, especially Madsen, who felt a little bit exposed playing that kind of character, and Hopper gave her support. There's an archival interview with Dennis Hopper from French TV. There's a 2021 interview with Virginia Madsen from the Kino Lorber, and from William Sadler from the Kino Lorber. Nick Dawson, who has written a book of Dennis Hopper interviews. There's a piece with him for 20 minutes. And there's also a piece by crime writer Duane Zerinsky on author Charles Williams, which is very good as well. So again, another really good Radiance release. The film looks really good, and one well worth checking out if you haven't seen it since the VHS days. This is a UK Blu-ray premiere. Obviously, as I mentioned in the extras, it is available on Kino Lorber in the United States. So thanks very much for watching this random review of The Hotspot from 1990, directed by Dennis Hopper. Please let me know in the comments below if you've seen it and what you think of it, and hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films saying farewell.